Welcome to those of you in the room already. We'll give a couple more minutes for other guests to hop into the virtual room and get situated. This is the Virtual Art Talk with Meryl McMaster and Tarah Hogue, moderated by Roshii Montaño. Thank you so much for everyone being here today. We'll get started shortly. Hello. For those who just joined, we're going to wait just a couple more minutes to give folks a chance to get into the room. This is the man behind the curtain, Mike. We'll come on in just a moment to start introductions. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Mike Webb. I am the public engagement manager here at the Heard Museum. I'm so happy to present this virtual art talk to all of you today. We are continuing this series of virtual art talks, getting prepared for our exhibition opening on October 4th with Meryl McMaster Bloodline. So it is a great pleasure to welcome our panelists today who will introduce themselves in just a moment after some brief comments. We have Tarah Hogue, Meryl McMaster, and our moderator, Roshii Montaño. As always, if you enjoy learning about the exhibitions and the museum's collections, I encourage you to visit the Heard Museum's Billie Jane Bagley Library and Archives. The library is free and open to the public Monday through Friday, and it's a fantastic place to learn more about the artists and the works represented in the museum's collection. And these virtual art talks are possible thanks to the support we receive from our Heard Museum members. Members, if you're not a member yet, they get many special and exclusive benefits, including free museum admission, every day, a 10% discount in the museum shop, which is being remodeled and will be fully reopened later in October. And then invitations to members only events and lectures. Members also receive discounted event tickets and early admission to both the World Championship Hoop Dance Contest and the Heard Museum Guild Indian Fair and Market. So join as a member today. You can purchase your membership online at heard.org. You can come here on site or by calling us and getting some more information. So before I introduce our program and moderator, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping notes for viewers. So today's presentation is a webinar, and so you will only see the screens of our moderator and hosts. You will not be able to see any screens of the participants. If you would like to propose a question for our panel, please write your question in the chat box or Q&A box. If you scroll over your screen with your mouse or your finger, you should be able to see the pop-up that says chat or Q&A. We can field your questions there, and we leave about 15 minutes at the end to be able to look at those questions and answer. And then captions are available. So if you would like to use your captions, again, scrolling down to the bottom of the screen and looking for those options, turn them on at that menu screen. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. Super excited to get it started. So with that, it's my pleasure to pass it over to our moderator. Welcome, Roshii Montaño. Roshii?
Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon. And thank you for everybody who is joining us for today's program. My name is Roshii Montaño, and I am the Assistant Registrar and Curator at the Heard Museum. Today's program is organized in anticipation for our upcoming presentation of Meryl McMaster's first survey exhibition, Bloodline. And this exhibition provides a comprehensive overview of Meryl's career, featuring large-scale photographic self-portraits that reflect her mixed Plains, Cree, Métis, Dutch, and British ancestry. And Meryl McMaster Bloodline is co-organized by the McMichael Canadian Art Collection and Rainy Modern. And the Heard's presentation, A Bloodline, will open in just next week on Friday, October 4th. And today we're focusing this afternoon's conversation on Meryl's most recent body of work featured in Bloodline, titled Stories of My Grandmothers, which focuses on her paternal grandmothers from the Pheasant Cree Nation in present-day Saskatchewan, Canada. And I want to just start off by saying how honored I am to be moderating today's conversation. And I'm joined by two phenomenal Indigenous women that I admire deeply, artist Meryl McMaster and Rainy Modern curator Tarah Hogue. Now I invite Meryl and Tarah to introduce themselves. So Meryl, can you start us off?
Yes, for sure. Tanse, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So I'll just tell you a little bit of who I am, and then also kind of just explain a little bit about my practice, because I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with what I do. So I was born and raised in Ottawa, but I currently reside in Chelsea in Quebec, which is just north of Ottawa. And I come from a very big kinship of families with very diverse cultural backgrounds, which have been constantly kind of navigating throughout my life, but in a good way. And so my father, he's nêhiyaw from Red Pheasant Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. We're also citizens of Siksika Nation in Alberta, and also of Métis ancestry. And on my mother's side, I have Scottish, English, and Dutch. My mother's family immigrated from Holland in the 1700s, and then from the UK in the early 1900s, and they settled in southern Saskatchewan near the grasslands and were farmers. But as you might kind of get a sense from this photo, I work in photography, And my focus is in kind of performative self-portraiture, though recently I've started to include sculptural installation and film within the gallery spaces that I work in. And yeah, my body really becomes this kind of canvas onto which I'm kind of creating these magically real moments. And you know, I've always been interested in questions of looking at the world around me and just trying to figure out my place within the world. And so over the years, these questions of belonging and identity and have really kind of crept up. And I kind of look at those through, you know, how we kind of form them through our connections with our lineage, our shared histories, our culture, and also our connection with the land. And you know, it's in these very like complex histories that I'm interested in looking at these stories and ideas and having these reflections of what this all means coming together within myself. And then I really try to strive and kind of hold space for that. So my images are kind of these reflections that I'm thinking about, you know, creating these large scale photographic images to kind of cross these time scales and generations and these lifetimes and sometimes these geographical eras as well. So anyways, that's a little bit about myself and my art. Take it from you, Tarah.
Thanks, Meryl. Tanche Kiawao, Lumieten and Wabamitek, Tarah Hogue the Shinikashan, Egwa Machif Nia, Red Deer Dushin, Nimama Marguerite Ishinikashu, Egwa Holland Ostio. Ni papa sanan si Leo Egwa Machif Wia. Maparanti, Sealy, Hogue, Taylor, Turcotte, Caplet, Egwa, Gibosh, Red River, St. Francis Xavier, Egwa, St. Charles, Oschuak, Adjunct Curator, Indigenous Art, Remy Modern, Nia. So hello, everyone. I said it's nice to see you all. And I introduced myself in Machif, which I'm obviously still learning. And I'm sure you probably caught most of what I was saying. I shared my family names. My mother is also an immigrant from the Netherlands, and I'm Métis from the Red River communities of St. Charles and St. Francois Xavier on my father's side. I currently work as the adjunct curator of Indigenous art at Remy Modern, which is a role I've transitioned to fairly recently after working as the curator of Indigenous art at the museum. And I'm one of the co-curators of this fantastic exhibition of Meryl's work with Sarah Milroy from the McMichael Canadian Art Collection. I've been working at Remy Modern since 2020. That was a pandemic move for me. And before that, I lived and worked in Vancouver, Canada for many years. And coming to Remy Modern and coming back to the prairies was really a homecoming, felt like a homecoming for me, despite the fact that I was going to a community that was new to me. Red Deer, where I'm from in Alberta, is very similar to Saskatoon. It's you know, a smaller city on the river, on the prairies. And so I felt a lot of kinship going into that community for the first time. Red Deer and Saskatoon are in the same treaty territory also. So I'm joining from, I'm actually on the Treaty 7 side of the river today, but the Red Deer River is the boundary between Treaty 6 and 7 territories. And so that was another context that was familiar to me from my home. And when I started working at the museum, Meryl's practice was one that we regularly talked about wanting to bring into the museum. And so this exhibition was such a welcome opportunity for us to support an artist who we're all big fans of, but also whose practice very much speaks to the place where the museum is located, and to histories that are often not told or part of the broader public consciousness. And Meryl just brings them to life in such an imaginative and accessible and deeply thoughtful way. So looking forward to sharing space with you today. And thank you, Roshii, for the invitation.
Thank you both for your introductions. Now I guess we'll just get started with the presentation. Mike, thank you. Now I thought this was a wonderful work to get us started. It's titled "The Grass Grows Deep," and it just feels like a natural introduction to talk about Meryl, your 2022 series, Stories from My Grandmothers. And I was wondering if you could just share about this project and how it emerged.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, so Nokomanak at Simona, Stories of My Grandmothers, is my newest body of work, and it has 9 photographs and 2 films, which is a new area for me that I've ventured into. So hopefully people will be able to visit the exhibition and see them, as they're not up on my website, unfortunately. But the main inspiration for this body of work were personal belongings of my great-grandmother, Bella Watney. And my father came into possession of some of her belongings, as well as family photographs that we didn't know existed after his mother and his 2 brothers passed away. And, it was probably about a year, I guess, I had known about these, and I had personally kind of started to process looking through these photographs and some written documents that my great grandmother had written. And I think that when I was looking at these personal belongings, I kind of wondered if I could kind of be a conduit to start to tell some of their personal stories, but also in my kind of my way as well, and also looking at a larger kind of historical narrative of what was happening around the time that she was alive. And so 2 objects that I was quite interested in were a handwritten diary that she had written in a letter. And so this diary was very, very small. It's in the exhibition space. And she had written an entry for every day for a year. And they were very short sentences where she just talked about daily activities, farming, hauling wood. It would be baking bread, visitors from family members and friends, going to cultural events, social events, and what else? She also talked about when kids were sick, her children were sick, talked about the weather, it being very cold. I remember that was mentioned a lot. It was very cold today, cold again. Also, I remember she would talk about how many eggs she collected. I remember for like a whole 2 weeks, she talked about like, today I had 1 egg, no eggs, 5 eggs. So I thought that was an interesting insight kind of into their life, though she didn't say anything beyond kind of just what was happening day to day. Then there was a letter that was addressed to no one. And also from interviewing family members, no one kind of knew the purpose of this letter, excuse me. But she wrote this later in life, in her 70s. And it talked about the struggles that she had kind of throughout her life. By that time, she had been widowed. And you know, she talked about, you know, kind of being critical of community members as well as the federal government, because she was trying to get assistance from them, money that she was owed to build a house of her own. So this letter had a very different tone than the diary, and it was almost polar opposites in terms of, you know, kind of giving me a window into maybe who she was, because I never knew her. So, you know, when I was reading these, you know, these moments, it made me, you know, even more kind of drawn to finding out more about who she was. And so this led me to talking with family members more about who she was, and also wanting to know if they knew anything about her mother, my great-great-grandmother Matilda. They also called her Tilly Schmidt. And then also learning more about my grandmother, who I knew, Lena McMaster. And yeah, so I got the chance to talk with my great uncle and aunt who knew them, and then also my father, who had memories of them. And you know, they had a very hard life, like many other First Nation, Métis, Inuit people did during these times. And you know, there was many layers to my grandmothers that have been forgotten, and also been tried to be silenced as well. And so, you know, I thought through creating this work that, you know, I could give kind of a small voice, you know, back to them, and into their stories. So, so I took inspiration from these personal moments of learning more about these three women, and because they were around during really tough times. I mean, I'll talk later. My great-great-grandmother Tilly might have been witness to a mass hanging in Battleford. I mean, all my grandmothers grew up during a time of the Indian Act and treaty making and the residential school system, and you know, experiencing a time when ceremonies and dances were outlawed. So you know, they had been through a lot. So you know, I really wanted to make them, you know, visible through these images, and you know, because many of our histories go unrecognized. So especially for Indigenous women. So that was one of my main, you know, kind of wishes with this work. So this image kind of speaks to that. You know, I'm really contemplating questions of legacy, and you know, how the stories we inherit, you know, how we're influenced by that, and how those are passed down, and looking also like critical events that kind of change the course of history. So you know, I've recreated this diary that I'm holding, you know, out of inspiration of my great grandmother's diary, and I kind of have bound this picture of them to the front. You know, I looked at historical clothing from the plains, which was really interesting, looking at details of that, which I was inspired by for the costume that I made. So in some of the garments, they would have, historically they'd have beadwork, and then at the end they would attach a bell or a thimble to the end. So I kind of did a little nod to that through the garment, and then I also did some my own edging, beading around, and then I kind of did this abstract pattern on this kind of handkerchief around my neck, and this image was specifically taken on red pheasant, very near to where my family's homes are. So you can go to the next photo.
Yeah, and Meryl, your you know, you mentioned being a conduit of this memory and this history, and even this gesture of holding the diary with the photo. You're holding their memory, and I think that's a really a beautiful acknowledgement. And I've always felt that your work and your self-portraits are gorgeously layered compositions, and with every detail, every decision that you make is intentional and significant. And we can close up on any part of this image and talk about all of the elements that build this story. And you mentioned that you used some family photographs and family ephemera letters to really, you know, create this story in this body of work. And I'm just wondering, when you compose an image, does it start with, a broad question? Does it start with an accessory, a costume, a place? And I'm wondering where to begin when you're building this world.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I don't have any one way, I guess, of thinking about an image in my head. But all of those points you made are all things that I do implement in how I sometimes it's an idea just comes to my mind randomly, it feels, like it's kind of like a bit of a dream or a flash, that, I get a spark of inspiration that I, trying to fish around in my purse for like my notebook to write down before I forget. Especially these days after having kids, my memory is, just a fleeting moment sometimes. So that notebook is very handy. So that is an ideal sometimes, and you just have, those amazing just sparks of creative thought. But other times, when I'm thinking about a project or an image, for sure it'll be a story, like thinking of these stories, then images start to kind of come to my mind. Sometimes I work specifically with site-specific locations, where I'm working with the history of the landscape and maybe a specific historical event that has happened at that place. And so that then starts to inform how I will begin thinking of something and what will come to mind. Sometimes it's materials. Lots of times I will just go into secondhand stores or even hardware stores, or different places anywhere, and just look at materials, and sometimes that will spark an inspiration where I feel like something kind of mimics another material. Like one example I can think of, though it's not in these slides, but I've worked with balloons before, and the movement of a long skinny balloon kind of mimics ribbon and movement, or feathers kind of flying in the wind. And so sometimes a material can just spark that kind of thought in my head. So yeah, there's really no kind of rhyme or reason to how kind of images kind of form. It's a combination of lots of different ways. And did I answer that question?
Yeah, you answered it beautifully. Thank you. And in your introduction to this work, you talked about red pheasant is significant to this body of work, and you were photographed in a prairie in red pheasant. And I want to ask Tarah. I want to ask you a little bit about Rémy Modern's role in developing Bloodline. And I'm wondering if you can contextualize the significance of sharing Meryl's work in Treaty 6 territory with the red pheasant community.
I really love that you started with the image of the grass grows deep. It's the work that I often also started my tours on. It to me seems like and this is, completely my own interpretation, but it seems like the most self-portrait kind of work in the exhibition. And here, as you so beautifully put, Roshii, Meryl is holding this image of her grandmother's while standing on red pheasant. So red pheasant is located a little over an hour north of Saskatoon, in Treaty 6 territory, like I said before. And as part of our approach to programming at Rémy Modern, we often try to partner with communities that are connected to our exhibitions, but also, communities that are connected to the treaty territory that we're in, and really try to develop programming in partnership with those communities. And that was really my role and Rémy Modern's role within this project. So Meryl began conversations about developing a new body of work with Sarah, and the intention was to tour the exhibition. And so they approached us as a partner on the tour, with that intention of really grounding and honoring the work's genesis in the territory where Rémy Modern is located. And so the project that came out of this was, as you see on the screen, the Red Pheasant calendar. And this was really something that responded to Meryl's desire to honor her community in a very reciprocal way, which I think follows from the reciprocal nature of the work itself. I think it's very much a gift back to Red Pheasant, and we heard that from community members that came to see the exhibition. And the project was coordinated by Kim Bird, who's our Indigenous Programs Coordinator at Rémy Modern, and we also enlisted help from Elder Elsie Whatney, who is a grandmother herself who is raising grandchildren, and that became the focus of the project. So if you go to the next slide, this is the calendar page for March 2025. We worked with Métis and Dene photographer Tennille Campbell to photograph the grandmothers and their grandchildren on red pheasant out on the land. Tennille is incredible at, bringing out the best in the sitters, being very intentional about how they wanted to dress, where they wanted the photo shoots to take place, and then building on these conversations that we had with the families, and thinking about the experience of raising your grandchildren from the grandmother's perspective, as well as from the grandchildren. So most of the grandkids in the calendar are women and girls, but they're not only. And you can just see just a little snippet of what was shared. And these projects, for the most part, they're really not public facing. It's very much about leveraging the institution's resources and connections to support the vision of the community. So that was really Elder Elsie guiding us in that work. And we just had so much positive feedback from it. Everyone talking about how healing it was to, honor this relationship. And so it was just, a wonderful project. And all of the community members from Red Pheasant are getting copies of the calendar, and all of the participants got sort of framed canvas prints of their favorite photographs. And so just a really wonderful way of activating Meryl's already deeply meaningful work.
Yeah, this is absolutely incredible, and story work is just so empowering to community members and to their stories. And there are complexities, and to hold space for remembering and reflection. it's difficult to do that, but like you just said, this project genuinely just feels like an act of care and healing for the community. Um, and it's great. Thank you for sharing a little bit about that programming. Next slide, please. Great. And now this work, Every Path Tells. Meryl, you again feature directly this item, personal ephemeral item, and you can see it very clearly on your arm. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this work and the elements and the story that you're telling through this photographic work.
For sure. So this image was taken kind of the south part of Battleford, along this abandoned train track, which used to lead into Red Pheasant, and my father and his family would catch the train to go into town frequently when they were young. You can kind of see in the distance in the fog kind of the bridge, the bridge trestle that's in the back, and also it's very close, kind of the fog covers it, but just up the hill is actually the residential day school that my grandmothers went to, called the Battleford Industrial School. So this location holds a lot of different memories for my family. And one thing that kind of came up in some of the personal items and also some stories that I was told by family members was the train. And so I wanted to, through an image, kind of look at that connection. So one of the objects or documents, I guess, that my grandma Lena kept was a travel train card, which you see on the top left portion of the screen. And this was a card that was given to Indigenous peoples. Basically, it gave them the right to travel also at a reduced rate. The card below it is a treaty ticket, and it's kind of an unusual document. I'm still trying to do research into kind of what it meant, because there's not that much information about what it was used for. But from what I have had conversations with family members about, it would have been something to show, proof that she could travel by train, leave the reserve, or prove her status, because at this time, I didn't get to tell too much about my grandmother's, but she had on the train, actually, she become a nurse in her early years, and she traveled out to Gleason, Alberta as a nurse to do work out there. And she met a Siksika man and married him, and so she changed her status and or not status, she changed her membership and her citizenship, and she became a citizen of Siksika. And so anyways, she had my uncle Howard, who is my dad's eldest brother, and that husband sadly passed away when Howard was a baby. So and then she had two more children after that, which is my dad and his other brother. So that's a side story, but yeah, so she used the train a lot, which was interesting to travel. But you can go to the next slide. Here's another photo that is of my grandma Bella. And so it's very hard to tell, but she is sitting the very bottom row on the far right of the image. She's the little girl. There's two people beside her, and then a little girl, and there's this very subtle X underneath her. This was an image we came across, and it's of Bella, my great grandma Bella, with other of her classmates from the Battleford Industrial School and her teachers, and sitting amongst the railway workers who were working on the railway through Battleford at the time. So people didn't really know the story behind this image, or how, why the children were photographed with the workers, but it was an image that was kept by my family. So and then you can go to the next image, because I know we're not running out of time, but we're getting short on time. But so another connection to the railway was through the story of pennies. So my grandma Lena and her father and her brothers and sisters traveled to Biggar, Saskatchewan in 1939 to see King George VI and Queen Elizabeth make their way across Canada on the train. And they traveled by horse and wagon. And I was told it was a 12-hour ride, so a very long ride. And while they were passing the time waiting for this kind of spectacle to happen, Lena and her brother and sisters put some pennies on the track and wanted waited for the train to flatten them. And it was an interesting story. It seems like it's a very, very small moment that I remember my dad remembered my grandma telling him, but it stuck in her mind as something she did. And I also thought it was interesting that these penny, which I found a penny from that exact year, had King George's face on it. And I just thought it was so interesting that unknowingly to her, she was kind of defacing the penny of King George, coming through town. And so anyways, so, I wanted to incorporate that story into the costume in somehow. So you can see there's this pouch that I have. You see it more in the film. It's more present in the film, but I'm wearing it in this image. But there's a little view of it here in my studio where I've used flattened pennies and attached them to this pouch. And then you obviously see the travel train card that's attached to my wrist. And then you see a detail that's been pulled out of my face. And I was interested in painting my face with a pattern that is kind of this abstract pattern that represents butterflies, and you can see these on teepees. And I'll touch on that. I also use red a lot in my work. You see this in my skirt, you see this on my face, obviously. And it's kind of become, I started this a while ago, but I've now kind of carry it almost through every image that I do presently. And I think about the color red a lot. It's this very powerful color, and it's also presently become to connect to a lot of different meanings, especially within Indigenous causes, and which is wonderful. And so one reason that I look at the color red is I look at this idea of my connection to my ancestors and my family and that kind of bloodline. And so to me, it represents this responsibility to pass down knowledge that we have learned from our elders and pass it down to the next generation. So I use red in lots of different ways. It kind of can change between images, but that's kind of one of the main connections I use with the color red. So
I can just
Beautiful.
interject a little
absolutely.
thing here. Meryl's using all of these old photographs, like these, family ephemera, these stories. And you see it again more in the film, but she's also wearing this tape player on her back that is activated in the film work. And I like that that's something that's like vintage from your childhood.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask Tarah, when we were chatting in preparation for this conversation, you shared that Rémy Modern had acquired the garments and accessories and handmade objects that Meryl creates for these photographs. And I was really struck by this act. And I was wondering if you could talk about that acquisition and perhaps a little bit about how you understand these items as significant to the collection and to provide context in Meryl's work in the collection. Yeah.
Well, I should clarify that Ramey Modern purchased the suite of photographs and videos for the collection, and then Meryl very generously donated the props and costumes from I think 7 of the works in the series, keeping like a couple of more personally meaningful items for herself, which is, I also love that. And this was the first time that Meryl donated this kind of material from her practice to a public museum. And so we're very grateful that Meryl has entrusted us with the care of these things. You know, for an artist who is really known for working in this time-based media, photography, and now film, there is so much artistry and labor and care and research that goes into the handmade aspects of her work. And, you know, she used the phrase earlier, like making things magically real, and that handmade, that materiality is so important to making that happen in the work. And so, you know, the donation of the props and the costumes really like precipitated a lot of conversation in the museum. We do not have like a garment or clothing or costume focus in the collection. So we really are treating and thinking about these objects as standalone artworks in and of themselves. They haven't been out on display yet, so we haven't had to, you know, go through the conversation of negotiating what that is going to, you know, look like in the museum. But you know, of course, it offers this like unparalleled opportunity to gain greater insight into the artist's process, and allows us to, you know, further the story that is embedded in these works, which has so much relevance to the communities where we're located, through a different kinds of visuality and materiality. So I am really looking forward to the moment when we need to install one of the costumes, and then Meryl and I can
that would be
have
great.
the conversation about what that display is going to look like, because that will be new for the practice as well, right?
Yeah, because I mean, I'll just add that, yeah, because usually it's not often that I show you know, the objects, the garments alongside the photographs, you know, and it's so, you know, and I think, you know, I usually, you know, take the mindset just that the you know, when I've created the work, you know, everything, and I probably said this before, but everything's kind of activated and comes to life like in the photograph, and that's what tells the story. You know, so the individual pieces, they're more kind of the insight into the process, and that viewers can see. And I mean, they're art objects, you know, in themselves, but the creation of them is purposely for it all to come together in these moments that I take. So yeah, I'm interested in how, yeah, moving forward, how that will kind of feel within the gallery space if they ever are shown, and yeah, what, you know, kind of, yeah, feeling they evoke, you know, on their own, you know. And so
Yeah, and Mike, can you quickly go through the rest of the slides and just so we can look at the work in this series? I know we're running out of time, but here again is another detail with the various items that were donated to Ramey Modern, and this is one of my absolute favorite works, Remember the Sky You Were Born Under, and I loved the kind of wire floral details, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. It looks like we have to move on to our Q&A. We only got through a couple of works, but I feel like we had a nice conversation, and I think our viewers are just gonna have to come and see the exhibition, because we're installing in the gallery right now, and seeing it on a screen versus being in front of it is just a completely different experience. And you have to understand that the scale of these photographs are so large, and it just really brings you into Meryl's world. And I would really love to just kick off this Q&A, and I guess ask both of you, working with or uh, being present to Meryl's work. There's a lot of delving into history, your personal histories, and working with that material, and thinking about perhaps legacy or your own voice for future generations. And I know, Meryl, you have children now. Has this project made you reconsider how you document your life aside from photography, and how you foresee your voice being clear to your future ancestors?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough having kids, but then to have to yeah, it brings an extra level, I guess, to, I guess when I think about the stories that I'm telling, and that that I'm interested in. I mean, yeah, having kids, I mean, it definitely makes, I mean, you obviously bring the lens, just looking at yourself, to this kind of, these other little humans, and that are a part of you. But so yeah, it brings the focus, kind of outside of my own body, I find. And so I think that the conversations, the questions that I'm asking myself, I think about that now in terms of how my daughters will have those conversations of their own. So I think about that, um, and I do think about, yeah, kind of what struggles will they also have in their lives. So I think a lot about that. And something that I always felt growing up was trying to find that sense of belonging. I didn't grow up on the res, or really near my family. I mean, I was with my parents, but we travel back home a couple of times a year, but I felt that distance. And so I think much of my life I've been trying to kind of find that sense of belonging. And I think about that with my girls and how they will feel, because we still live far away, and my hope is to actually to move closer back home, because I worry about that. I want them to feel closer to that landscape, to the language, and to our stories, and not feel so far away. So anyways, I mean, I think I will always kind of look at, through my work, I think I'll always be kind of exploring similar questions, because I think it's that the questions and the themes that I look at are something that changes throughout your life and grows, but it always is something that stays with you, like kind of looking at oneself and who one is. And so I don't think that'll change, but I think, yeah, I think that it felt like a natural progression to get even closer to the stories of my family, and explore that through my work. And so I don't know. We'll see where it goes, but yeah, you know.
Thank you, Meryl. And Tarah, I was wondering if, we're being, working closely with these photographs and Meryl's intention with this project, has it made you reconsider how you archive your own stories and histories? And have you thought about being more intentional about it, maybe?
That's a good question. I mean, when you were speaking, Meryl, about this this path toward belonging, this searching for longing for it, I was reminded of something that Kathy Mattis, who's a Michif scholar, often says, which is that we're always in this process of bringing our hearts home, and that is really the role that artists and curators play is in, showing us a way of how to do that. And certainly in the exhibition and in the moments that Meryl and I got to spend together in installing, I was able to share like the affinity that I have within my own family history, the way that I identify with some of the stories in Meryl's images, because, we all have these histories of disruption and disconnection and survival and difficulties. And what Meryl is giving us in this body of work, and it really sings in the videos in particular, is that she's offering us, she's saying, she's speaking through her ancestors to herself in this way that Roshii, you talked about, it's this very caring kind of gesture that's sort of pervasive throughout the work. And it's I think an example of a way of bringing our hearts home that is vulnerable and thoughtful and gentle, while speaking to those very complex histories. So certainly, I don't make photographs, but I write and and I curate, and those are avenues for me to think about that process as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I resonate with your answer just because, we have our own tools as curators to write, and I think also, revealing hidden histories is also very, very important to my own practice, and thinking about the ways in which to communicate that information to the public. And yeah, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? Let's see. Well, I would like to ask another question about the space you held at Red Pheasant, and I was wondering if you could speak to, or both of you to speak a little bit to the community's response, and if any moments in particular really stand out to you.
I have to think about the opening because Elder Elsie came and welcomed everyone to the museum and to the exhibition. And she said, "I'm not going to cry." Then she cried. Meryl said, "I'm not going to cry." Then she cried. I said, "I'm not going to cry." Then I cried. Everybody cried. And it was because of how deeply moved Elsie was, seeing those images, seeing the stories of these women, some of whom she also knew, brought to life in this way. And, of course, in the kind of space that a museum is, which has historically really been part of that exclusion and erasure of these kinds of narratives. I wasn't privileged to be on the ground with Kim and Tennille when they were doing the photographs. So I haven't heard. I've heard only through Kim that it was like magic and healing and something that is very difficult to capture and to reconvey sort of in a public setting or in another moment, if you catch my drift. But Meryl might have some other things to share.
Well, yeah, I mean, my memory also goes back to the opening, and I mean, it was a really special opening for me because a lot of my family for the first time could come or at a later date see my work in person. I mean, I met Elsie for the first time, but it was really special because she knew my grandmothers, and so she shared stories with me and memories, and we had lots of hugs and laughs and tears in those moments of just being together, and but yeah, it was really special. A lot of my family were at the opening, and just to hear their responses probably meant more than anything in the world. My great aunt, who was one who I talked with a lot when I was working on this, and she passed away last year, but she made it to after the fact to the exhibition, and that meant so much to me. And she was just so positive and just so caring about seeing the exhibition and just seeing the stories and how they came to life through my just conversations with her a year prior. And yeah, and I mean, I just all the community work that was done, organized by the Remy, I mean, meant so much. I mean, working directly with the elders and community at Red Pheasant, I mean, that just meant so much to include them and be part of this whole journey. And so, I mean, that really, it was probably the most special opening that I've ever had. So, I mean, that just meant so much. And anyways, but
That's fantastic. I'm so happy, Meryl, that we're able to experience that. Sounds incredible. And I also want to thank both of you for participating in today's conversation. And I'm really excited to continue next week. And for our visitors, we will have Tarah and Meryl at the Heard Museum. Please come next Friday for our programming. There's going to be really incredible conversations, and you'll be able to see this gorgeous survey exhibition, Bloodline. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
See you all next week.
Yeah.
IRL.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Thanks, everyone. This is Mike again. Just a reminder for our visitors, if you could complete the small survey at the end of the webinar, we would appreciate it. And yes, please come out October 4th to First Friday, Meryl McMaster's exhibition opening. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.
Mm.